In a world where kingdoms fall and stars still remember names, this song was forged from magic memory and the dream that refused to die. Welcome to a tale where wonder still breathes. This story is entitled Trinkets of Tomorrow, a market stall, old letters, and true love created by Jesus Pampara. If this tale stirred something in you, a memory, a dream, or a truth, our Ko-fi, Amazon, and Patreon links are in the description. Support helps us keep writing for you and the ones you hold dear. Jess arrived in a town on a quiet morning where the mist rolled lazily off the river and the streets seemed to come with memory. His boots clicked against cobblestone slick from last night's rain. In his coat pocket was his notebook, creased, weathered, filled with ink stains and half sentences. He told himself he came here to write, to fill his pages with the slower world's rhythm. But he knew the truth. He came because of her. Kim Yongsun had known her since they were children, when afternoons were spent under the shade of a gingko tree near their elementary school, trading folded notes written with shy, trembling hands. "I like your laugh," hers once said, little hearts dotting the eyes. He had written back, bold in a way only children can be. "One day when we're older, I'll marry you." They'd laugh and hidden their faces, but somehow that promise clung like a scent you couldn't wash out. They stayed close through middle school, sharing little secrets, wishes, and silly fights, until life pulled them apart. Yet even in the years of silence, he never forgot her. Now, standing in the town square, he saw her again. She was behind the market stall, draped in soft-colored fabric like sunrise, pinks, pale yellows, lavender edges fluttering in the winter wind. Above her head hung a sign, "Fortunes and trinkets, hope for every hand." She looked up, startled at first, then her lips parted into the same familiar smile that once knocked the breath out of him at 13. "Jess? Yong?" he said, his voice breaking into a grin he couldn't stop. Before he could think, she was hugging him, warm and real and smelling faintly of citrus and the faint paper scent of letters from years ago. "You came," she whispered, almost like she didn't believe it. "I told you I would." Her hair was longer now, her face softer but brighter, and when she laughed, he felt 17 again, as if every graph of time folded into this one moment. "Welcome to my empire," she teased, stepping back and gesturing toward her stall. Trinkets lay neatly on velvet, tiny brass compasses, moon-shaped rings, charms carved into sparrows, shells polished to gleam like porcelain. Each one bore a tag handwritten in neat looping script, for words unsent, for courage waiting to bloom, for love beneath falling stars. Just tilted his head. "People really buy this? They're not just trinkets," she said. "They come with little fortunes, promises like bottled up wishes you can keep in your pocket. You'd be surprised how many people want to believe in something small and magical." He smirked. "Sounds like you need a writer." Her smile widened. "I was hoping you'd say that." And so he stayed. The days found a rhythm of their own. Mornings were for setting up the stall as golden sunlight slipped across the square. Afternoons for scribbling fortunes on cards and watching Yongsun charm strangers with her warmth. He remembered her habits easily. The way she hummed when she strung beads, how her fingers twirled straight threads of fabric when she was thinking. Some nights they closed late, lanterns glowing around them. As snow fell gently onto the cobblestones, and Jess would walk her home past the river, where ducks slept like folded boats. And always the past came creeping back in quiet fragments. "Do you remember," he asked one evening as they packed up, "the meteor shower in high school?" Yongsun laughed, head tilting back. "When you dragged me up the hill for 2 hours, and Maybe we saw three streaks of light. You said you'd never forgive me, he teased. I said I'd marry you if another one passed, she corrected softly, her smile shy, eyes lowering. Jess stared at her, words swelling in his chest like unspilled ink. He remembered that night vividly, her sitting on a blanket, cheeks flushed from the climb, a thermos of cacao between them, stars failing to appear, but her voice filling the sky instead, as she hummed the little tune she loved. Had written her a letter the next day, sliding it into her locker. When the stars come back, I'll ask you properly. He wondered if she still had it. The market was a book that wrote itself anew every day. Each stall a chapter, each passerby a sentence Jess wanted to catch before it drifted away. From behind her little table of trinkets and fortunes, he began not to see just customers, but entire stories, flickering and human in draw. One morning, an elderly man approached with an hesitant gait, his hands trembling as though he held the weight of something he couldn't quite put down. He paused before a locket etched with lilies, his breath catching. It's for her, he said, voice fragile as worn paper. His eyes lingered on the locket like he was seeing someone else entirely. Jess swallowed, pen poised over the fortune card. What would you like it to say? The old man's lips quivered. That I still talk to her every night, as if she's listening. Jess' throat tightened. He wrote carefully, for love that never leaves, even when unseen. Yongsun reached across the stall, her hand resting lightly over the man's weathered fingers. She'd be proud of you, she said softly, her voice balm. The man smiled then, but it was the kind of smile that hurts, that carries both grief and gratitude. He held the locket close, nodding gently before shuffling away through the morning's crowd. Just watched him go, feeling the echo of the man's devotion pressed against his ribs like something too big to name. Later that afternoon, a boy no longer than 8 came bounding up, coins clenched in his fist so tightly they left little crescents on his palm. His cheeks were flushed from the cold, his school uniform rumpled. Do you have something for bravery? He asked, almost whispering. I have to read in front of everyone at school tomorrow. His eyes darted nervously around, as if the very idea of it made him want to disappear. Just crouched to meet his gaze, seeing himself, awkward and unsure, reflected in the boy's earnestness. He picked up a charm shaped like a star, its tiny facets catching the late sunlight. It's not that they're scared, Jess said gently, pressing the charm into his hand. It's that they're scared and still do it anyway. Every hero starts there. The boy stared at the charm, his small fingers curling around it like it was a lifeline. Then I guess I can be a hero, he said, his voice trembling but a spark lit behind his words. He ran off, glancing back to the wave. Jess smiled faintly, warmth pulling in his chest as he watched him disappear down the alley. The hardest moment came late, one afternoon when the sun dipped low and painted the market gold. A woman approached, weary and drawn, her shawl fraying at the edges. She clutched a small photograph of a little girl to her chest. Please, she said, voice hoarse with exhaustion. My daughter, she's sick. I don't know what else to do. I'll buy anything at all. Young froze, her hands hovering uncertainly over the display, her eyes softening with helpless sympathy. Jess stepped forward, heart aching at the desperation etched on the woman's face. He picked up a pendant shaped like a heart, smooth and simple, and pressed it on her trembling hands. This is for hope, he said, steady and sure, even as his own chest ached. Sometimes it's the first medicine anyone needs. The woman stared at him for a moment, then clutched the pendant so tightly it was as if she could squeeze her fears out through her palms. Tears welled, spilling freely as she whispered thank you, before walking away, her shoulders trembling. Just watched her vanish into the crowd silent. Do you think, he began after a long pause, his voice low, any of this actually works? Yongsun didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him, lantern light flickering in her dark eyes like small constellations. Then she smiled, quietly, wistfully. I think people want to believe, she said. And sometimes that's enough. You know, that song I hum, every day nothing feels different from the rest, as if spellbound. I stare out the window. That's how I used to feel once, like life was grey and endless, like nothing would change. Her fingers absently traced the edge of the charm on the table. Her voice softer now, but then little things started to happen. Things that reminded me color was still there, even if I just looked for it. Just stared at her, unable to breathe for a moment, because the way she spoke felt like it was about him as much about it was anyone else. Hope, she whispered, glancing at him and holding his gaze. Hope is what turns grey into color, Jess. And baby, maybe that's what we're selling here. That night, he couldn't sleep. Her song drifted in his mind like an unshakable echo, her voice almost there beside him. Lost in pointless thoughts again, I slip into the rhythm of the sky, floating free. Like words you never said but always felt. And in that melody, he realized it wasn't just hope they were giving away in little packages tied with ribbon. It was the same feeling that had once sat folded in their childhood letters, passed under desk and tucked in pencil cases. The belief that even the smallest promises could change everything. The town wasn't about or without its skeptics. One afternoon, a rival vendor selling cheap glassware laughed loudly for all to hear. Fortunes in trinkets. What's next? Selling air into bottles. Yongsun stiffened. Jess stepped forward without hesitation. Funny you say that, he replied evenly. Because your jars are empty. Ours are full with stories. A few customers chuckled. The rival sneered. But Jess walked up, plucked a tiny key-shaped charm from the stall and brushed it into her hand. Here, he said, a key to doors you didn't know you'd close. Something flickered in her eyes, confusion giving way to quiet thought. She didn't knock them again. Jess wrote about it all in the local paper. His column titled, The Stall of Small Fortunes, became his quiet masterpiece, stitched together from fragments of everyday magic. He wrote about the widower with the trembling hands, who whispered to a locket as if speaking into eternity, about a little boy with coins, clenched so tight they marked his palms, who wanted bravery wrapped in ribbon, about the exhausted woman who came for her sick child and left holding a pendant like it was salvation itself. He wrote them not as curiosities but as living poems, tenderly, vividly, in the way he saw them. Moments that could have gone unnoticed if not for the way they trembled at the edges with meaning. He wrote about the way people's fingers lingered over trinkets as though they were searching for a missing piece of themselves, about the way Yongsun smiled at strangers, not politely, but like she saw something good in them they hadn't remembered on their own. People don't just come to buy his latest piece read. They come to remember that once they believed in small miracles. And here in this square, beneath paper lanterns and music carried on winter air, they remember again. When it hit the front page, the town stared. By the next week, the stall was no longer quiet. The square transformed. Children tugged on their mother's sleeves, their mittened hands pointing at charms. Couples lingered in front of the display, laughing softly, teasing each other over which fortune they choose. Travelers, curious and wide-eyed, leaned in close to watch Jess scribble fortunes in his precise hand, his words now as much as part of the trinkets as the ribbon or metal. Buskers set up by the fountain, guitars slung over shoulders, their chords weaving warmth into the cold. Violins joined in, bright strings dancing over soft chords like snow swirling in the wind. The music wound through the square, mingling with scents of roasted chestnuts and sweet bread. And Yongsun, always Yongsun, stood at the center of it, her hair catching lantern glow like threads of ink spun into gold. She hummed as she worked, that same tune Jess had first heard many years ago under a meteorless sky. Jess loved watching people pause when they heard her humming, smiling without quite knowing why. One evening, as snowflakes fell like wandering stars, Jess watched her finish up a sale to an elderly woman who left smiling so brightly it seemed to melt the cold around her. Yongsun tucked the payment into the cash box, then stopped her fingers, lingering over something at the very bottom. He noticed the stillness in her posture, the slight hitch in her breath. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, its edges softened with age, its creases worn like lines of an old map. "I kept this here," she said quietly, holding it between them. Jess froze. He recognized it instantly. It was the letter he'd written in high school after that failed meteor shower, when the sky had betrayed him. "When the stars come back, I'll ask you properly." "You?" His voice cracked. "Young, you kept this?" Her smile was small and wistful, her thumb tracing over it like faded ink. "I treated it like a trinket," she admitted. "Like once we sell here. I dread it wherever the shop felt too small, whenever the days felt too long and grey. It reminded me that some promises aren't just words." Jess stared at her, his chest tight. "This stall," she continued, her gaze flickering over the table stacked with charms and fortunes, "started as something tiny. Just me selling little ribbons and baubles, wondering if anyone would care. But then people came back. They told me it helped, that they felt lighter." Her voice trembled, but she pressed on, steadying herself. "Their hope kept me going, and yours too. Even when you were gone, Jess, your words were here. I think that's why I never gave up. Part of me kept believing they'd bring you back to me, like all these fortunes bring people back to themselves." Snow gathered in her hair, glittering under lantern light. Jess reached for her hand instinctively, lacing his fingers with hers. The market hummed softly around them. The buskers shifted to a gentler song, low strings and guitar chords strumming through the crisp air. Lanterns swayed overhead, golden orbs bobbing against the dark. Jess's heart thundered. "Young," he murmured, stepping closer, "you don't know how many nights I read your letters to. How many times I almost came sooner, just to see if you still had that smile." Her laugh was soft and shaky. "I wondered if even I'd recognize you." "You always would," he said. Snow powdered the square in silence now, soft as shifted sugar. The crowd had thinned, vendors packed up, and only the faint echoes of music lingered. Yongsun's cheeks were flushed pink from the cold as she brushed snow off the counter. Jess stood there watching her, his breath fogging in the air, his hands trembling around the small velvet bundle in his coat pocket. He stepped forward, his boots crunching softly against the snow. "Young," he said, his voice trembling with everything he'd carried for years. She turned, eyebrows lifting at his tone. "Jess." He reached into his pocket, pulling out the velvet bundle and unwrapped it slowly. A simple silver ring gleamed in the lantern light, unadorned, steady, beautiful in its plainness. "Every letter we wrote," he said, his voice low but steady. "Every promise under the stars, I've carried them all here. I don't want to just write about tomorrow anymore. I want to live it with you. Will you marry me?" For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Trinkets might have been only ribbon and metal, but hope, real hope, had teeth, and faith had weight, and love turned even the smallest, simplest things into miracles. And as they stood there in the hush of snow and lantern glow, Jess knew they'd made theirs. Snow still dusted the market square when Jess and Yongsun reopened their stall after the quiet glow of the engagement. Word of the proposal had spread in whispers through town, carried by buskers, customers, and curious shopkeepers, and people smiled knowingly when they passed, as though love itself had become part of the square's air. One late afternoon, the sky blushed in pink and lanterns flickered to life. A young couple approached their stall. They couldn't have been older than their early 20s. Fingers intertwined, shoulders brushing nervously. The girl had a suitcase tucked beside her leg, as if she'd come straight from the station. The boy began awkwardly, his voice trembling in the crisp air. "We heard about your trinkets." He glanced at the girl beside him. She squeezed his hand, nodding encouragingly. She spoke next, her voice softer but steady. "I'm leaving for the Philippines. I got into a university there. It's everything I wanted, but..." Her eyes lowered, her grip on his hand tightening. "I don't want to leave him." Jess exchanged a quiet glance with Yongsun. He saw it there, the memory of their years apart, of folded letters and unsent words. She smiled gently, stepping forward. "Do you believe in holding onto something small?" Yongsun asked kindly. The girl blinked. "Like what?" Yongsun reached into the display and lifted a delicate charm. A tiny silver envelope, its surface etched with stars. "This one," she said, tying it carefully with the red ribbon, "is for promises carried across distance, for words you're too far to say but never stop feeling." Jess added, sliding over a fortune card and writing in his neat hand, "For love that travels miles and finds its way back every time." He handed it them. "When you feel far from each other, hold it. Read the words out loud, even if it's just to yourself. It's what we did," he admitted, his gaze flickering briefly toward Yongsun. The couple glanced between them, realization dawning. The boy smiled nervously. "You mean you too?" Yongsun laughed softly, brushing snow from her sleeve. "We know what it's like to hope, and hope kept us together even when we didn't see each other for years. Sometimes the smallest things, the letters and the reminders, are what get you through." The girl's eyes glistened as she clutched the charm and said, "Thank you," she whispered. "We needed this more than you know." They left hand in hand, their laughter drifting to the twilight. Jess watched them disappear down on the snowy street, the boy holding the girl's suitcase with his free hand, her head leaning on his shoulder. Yongsun slipped her arm through Jess. "I think it worked for them," she asked softly. Jess looked at her, the lantern light dancing in her dark eyes, and smiled. It already did. The charm's just there to remind them. As they stood together, snowflakes spun through the square. Buskers began playing again, and Yongsun hummed under her breath, her familiar melody that now felt like theirs alone. Jess rested his forehead against hers, their breath fogging together to go. "Funny, isn't it?" he murmured. "What is? That a year ago I came chasing stories. Turns out I was walking straight back to the one I'd left behind." She laughed softly, squeezing his hand. "And now we get to help everyone else find theirs." And with that, Jess kissed her in the lantern glow, their stalls still warm with trinkets and ribbons, and the quiet, unshakable magic of small miracles. And as the lanterns dimmed and the markets quieted, Jess helped Yongsun pack away the trinkets, their breaths fogging in the cold. Snow drifted softly, catching her hair like scattered stars. He glanced at her and the way her fingers lingered on the velvet cloth, and felt time fold in on itself. He could almost see her younger self beneath the old gingko tree, shyly passing him like a folded letter, with hearts dotting the eyes. He squeezed her hand gently. "We made it back," he whispered. Yongsun smiled, leaning into his shoulder as they turned toward home. Lantern light spilled behind them, warm against the snow, while the river's mist curled like memory along the edges of the square. The world felt still and infinite, a story closing only to begin again, and just realized that every letter, every fortune, Every small hope had led him here to this quiet miracle they now shared. This piece is dedicated to my dearest sunshine, Kim Yongsun. Please show her your love and support on her channel, Solar Sido. She's the heart behind so much of the light I share here. If you enjoy poems, short stories, and heartfelt journeys like this one, stay a while and see if any of my work resonates with you. I'd love for you to consider subscribing if you find a piece of your heart here. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what new story formats or poems you'd love to see. Your voice helps shape this going storybook we're building here. Thank you for walking this world with me. Have a nice day.